What's up, everybody? Matt Modi here with Jedi Modi Sports Network, and I am here to give you 5 player props for NFL Sunday Week 4 edition. As I switched from doing anytime touchdowns to just regular old player props, we had a successful start to that at least. I had 3 official player props that I gave out for Thursday Night Football. We got 2 of those 3 to cash. The only one we lost was Luke Musgrave over his receiving yards, which was a bad beat. The Packers offense couldn't do anything in the first half. Then he got concussed. Of course, the Packers offense came live in the second half when he was off the field. That goes down as an L, but we cashed Sam Laporta over his receiving yards prop, and we cashed A.J. Dillon under his rushing yards prop. So we end the day up a slight profit of 0.85 units, which we will take after a horrible start to Tater Time Anytime Touchdown picks. As I mentioned, I got 5 for you guys for Sunday that we can get right into. So play number 1 in the Bills versus Dolphins game, we're going to take Josh Allen to go over 33.5 rushing yards. This is at minus 115 odds at BetMGM. So one of my favorite prop bets to target is Josh Allen and his rushing yards, specifically on games that are either considered big games, which this one definitely is, or games in which they're going up, the Bills, are going up against a good defensive line, so he might get pressured more than normal. To start the year, he's hit this in 2 of 3 games. He hit it in week 1 against a very good Jets defense. He also hit it last week against the Commanders, who have a very good defensive line. He missed it week 2 against the Raiders, when he barely needed to do anything because they just smashed the Raiders. And even though they smashed the Commanders last week, the final score was like 37-3, that game was a slog for the Bills offense most of the game. It was only 16-0 at the end of the third quarter heading into the fourth. So Josh Allen, because their offense wasn't having as much success and because the Commanders have a good defensive line, ran the ball more. Going back to last year, the beginning of the 2022 season, Josh Allen hit this in 13 of 21 games. He's got this at a 62% hit rate since the beginning of last year. As I mentioned, he hit this in 2 of 3 games so far this year. And going back to last year, he hit this in 2 of 3 games against the Dolphins. The only one in which he didn't go over was when they played in the playoffs, when the Dolphins had their third string quarterback playing for them. The game ended up being closer than initially thought. The Bills were leading for most of the game until Josh Allen turned it over. Wasn't a game in which he rushed a ton. It was also a game in which the Bills mostly had it in hand, aside from a couple weird Josh Allen turnovers. So for this game, which is going to be awesome, by the way, probably going to have a ton of firepower on both sides. Josh Allen is definitely going to be fired up to let the Dolphins know that the Bills still run the AFC East. So the guess here is that he's going to be running early and often. 33.5 yards is pretty low, so I like for him to go over. Cashing our first play. Next up, we're sticking in the same game, Bills versus Dolphins. We're taking another Bills rushing prop over, this time James Cook to go over 55.5 rushing yards. This is also at minus 115 odds at BetMGM. Same game, another Bills player, as I mentioned, to go over the rushing prop. I understand that some of you might think that this is negatively correlated. Why would you take 2 players on the same team to go over the rushing yardage prop? But the thing is, Josh Allen really only runs on passing downs. They don't do a ton of designed quarterback runs. They don't do a ton of RPOs either. So Josh Allen mostly just runs on passing downs when he's scrambling. And James Cook obviously will get rushing yards on rushing downs. And it's funny because there's a lot of intrigue about the Bills running back situation heading into the season. How are they going to divvy up the carries and the snaps? Well, there's been no doubt that James Cook has been their number 1 running back. He leads the team in running back snaps. He leads the team in carries. He's also having a really good year. That's just, I think, going under the radar just because he hasn't scored yet. But he's having a really good year. He missed this in week 1, I mentioned, against a really, really good Jets front. He hit this in the past 2 games. Week 2, he had 123 rushing yards. Week 3, he had 98. Just last week, he had 98 rushing yards. So as long as this game, the Dolphins don't get out to a quick 14-0, 21-0 lead, I think the Bills are going to lean on the ground game a little bit with James Cook. And he's had a lot of success doing so. I think he's going to continue. Cashing our second play of the slate. Next up, in the Steelers versus Texans game, we're taking Tank Dell to go over 43.5 receiving yards. Again, this is at -115 odds at BetMGM. Tank Dell, rookie wide receiver for the Texans, has been really good for them through 3 weeks. Seems to have been a great find from this Texans team. The Texans, have been losing most of the games, aside from last week when they pummeled the Jaguars. But aside from that, regardless, they have not had any success running the ball. They've needed to have been throwing it a ton. Luckily, CJ Stroud looks really good despite a ton of injuries along the offensive line. CJ Stroud has had some success, and the team in general has had success passing the ball as well between Tank Dell and Nico Collins. Those two receivers, they're tied in terms of targets per route run. They're both good options. I like Tank Dell. His number is a little bit lower, and the projections seem to be a little bit better on him. I also like the fact that it's a young player who is earning more targets in the offense. It's only a 3-game sample, so obviously anything we talk about, especially for rookies, is going to be a low sample size. But week 1, he only had 4 targets. Weeks 2 and 3 combined, he had 17. He also went over this receiving yardage total in the last 2 games as well. Props.cash is a website that I love to look at for historical data, as well as they have projections. And I'm not 100% sure, to be honest with you, what goes into their projections, so I can't really comment on that. Just looking at their projections, though, they have his receiving yardage at 77.5 yards. It's one of the biggest differences between what the books have an over-under at and what they have their projections at. Pittsburgh is also allowing the 10th most passing yards per game. So I do like Stroud to go over his passing yards as well. Not that we're going to track that. We're just going to track Tank Dell as our third play for this video. Next up, fourth play in the Cardinals versus 49ers game, we're taking Josh Dobbs to go under 190.5 passing yards. This is at -115 odds at DraftKings. On the Cardinals team as a whole, I and probably a lot of people seemingly have to take a massive L because they're significantly more competitive than I thought going into the year. Not only did they beat the Cowboys last week, but they're also 3-0 against the spread. They've kept every game they've played in close, and then, like I said, dominated the Cowboys last week. But regardless, with all that said, I'm still fading Josh Dobbs in his matchup against the 49ers. Remember, we're taking him to go under 190.5. FanDuel has his over-under priced at 183.5. And I mentioned this in my last video, but FanDuel generally seems to be pretty sharp with their player prop projections. A lot of the time, FanDuel is an outlier compared to every other book. And a lot of the time, FanDuel is correct. That is going back on 3 years of me doing this with these NFL player props. And then props.cash has his projected passing yards at 140. So they both are below the number we are getting it at. And this does make sense. The Cardinals offense, really the only success that they've had has been on the ground with James Conner, who's having an amazing year. Josh Dobbs did have a good game in week 2 against the Giants, but the other 2 games he did not play as well, at least from a passing yardage perspective. The similarity is the Giants have a bad defense. The other 2 teams, the Commanders and the Cowboys, have a good defense, especially good defensive line. Now, the Cardinals are playing the 49ers, who have the 4th best defense in the NFL, according to DVOA. They also have the 4th best passing defense, according to DVOA as well. So I do not project Josh Dobbs to have a good game. Even if the Cardinals are losing the majority of the game, they're not going to abandon the ground game. They're still going to run the ball a lot. And Josh Dobbs can also run himself. So it's a low total, still taking the under. I think that the Cardinals are probably going to get smacked in this one finally as our 4th play. Next up, 5th and final play of the video, Kirk Cousins to go over 275.5 passing yards, -115 odds at DraftKings. We all love to make fun of Kirk, but Captain Kirk is having an awesome start to the year. Here, it's been 3 games, I get it. But here are his passing yardage totals through these 3 games. 344, 364, and 367. He's been really, really good, and his advanced stats look good as well in terms of on-target percentage of his throws. A lot of his throws have been catchable. He's always prone to turn it over. That's classic Kirk, but that just makes him need to pass it more. Part of the reason why the Vikings have had so much success passing the ball, and the reason why they've been passing so much, is because they can't get anything going on the ground. Even in a plus matchup last week against the Chargers, they didn't get anything going on the ground. Alexander Mattison just has not been that guy so far, taking over for Dalvin Cook. And admittedly, the Panthers defense has been good against the pass if you look at their entire sample, but week 1, they played against Desmond Ridder. Week 2, they played against Derek Carr, who's been really bad to start with his Saints career. Last week, the Panthers finally played a good passing offense. Geno Smith lit them up for 296 passing yards, barely went under 200. The Seahawks also had a lot of success running the ball, and they're winning most of the game as well. So even if a similar thing happens with the Vikings, they're probably still going to pass a lot with Kirk, and they're probably going to have a lot of success doing so. When you have Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson and Jordan Addison, it's a lot easier to just rack up receiving yards. And for reference, FanDuel has his over-under at 279.5. Props.cash has his projection at 347 passing yards. We don't even need him to hit 300, just to hit 276, and we are cashing this as our fifth and final pick of the evening. I myself put 1 unit on all 5 of these individually, but since 5 is a little bit of a bigger number, bigger slate, I wouldn't blame you if you only wanted to put half a unit on them. I will track as 1 unit plays, but that's all I got. So appreciate everybody for tuning in. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and have a good one.